Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 65, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, movie review. McBrien here, along with Yancy Eaton, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. And speaking of generations, I'm the Gen X guy, as you know, and my millennial co-host is Yancy Eaton. Yancy, what's new in the world of pop in your world, my friend?
What's new? Honestly, not a whole lot. I made a New Year's resolution to read less articles and screw around less on Twitter and really focus on getting books read. And I'm already on my 5th novel of the year, which is a really good pace even for me who normally reads, 2-3 hours a day. And this isn't like a humble brag, look at Yance, but it feels really good to kind of say you want to do something and then actually start doing it. And, I've shed a little bit of weight. My eating habits are much better. So the new year is off to a swimming start, to be honest with you. How about you?
Well, that's good. Well, you know how I feel about post-secondary education and furthering education and things like that. So reading is a wonderful thing. Will you take recommendations from me if I throw some novels at you that I think you should read? Especially classics. I have some classics that I'll throw at you. So I'll put together some and we'll talk about that in a future show. For me, I mentioned last week, I think that I finished Breaking Bad. My wife and I finished it. So we were looking for a new show to watch. And all these people were telling me, oh man, you got to watch Suits. Suits is a great show. So we put it on. I watched one episode of it and I hated it. And my wife was like, well, everyone likes it. It's got to be good. So we got to watch one more episode. So we watched the second episode. And I'm like, and that's the thing. My argument is well, what do you mean we have to watch it because everyone else says it's good? We just watched an episode and it sucks. We can see with our own eyes. Well, everyone says it's good. So maybe it gets better. So we watched
one thing I'll say about you, Chris, is you definitely do not care if everybody says it's good. No. You do not care at all. Yes. And vice versa. You don't care if everybody says it's bad either. So
no, yeah, exactly.
Appreciate you. If you like it, you like it.
That's the thing. I take a lot of heat for it sometimes. So I don't think we're gonna watch that. So if anybody wants to go reach out to me on Twitter at CMcBrien, IEN, tweet to me and tell me what series that my wife and I should start binge watching. I put it out there. I put a little informal poll on Twitter and I said, should we watch? Because my wife was mentioning The Wire. And, I've heard good things about it too. It's not like Suits that, she heard some people said it was good and it sucks. But, The Wire is supposed to be really good. So I'd like to watch that and she would too. But so that was her nomination. She's like, oh, let's watch The Wire. And she's like, what do you want to watch? I want to go back and watch WKRP in Cincinnati. Again, all 4
Of course.
Of course, that's what I do.
Of course.
And people on Twitter are like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Watch The Wire. Don't watch WKRP in Cincinnati. And then a couple other people tweeted pictures of WKRP in Cincinnati and said, yeah, you got to do it. So I don't know. That's the way I'm leaning. I'm leaning to KRP, but we'll have to wait and see how this goes. But anyway, so I threw a movie at you this week from Gen X from 1975, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Are you ready to get started talking about it?
Yep, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's hit it.
I was like, oh my God, that was incredible.
Okay, so we got the millennials take on it.
It's weird.
We might get to Scorched Earth yet.
But you often have the textbook dancer.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
You've been doing a lot of stuff from the 80s, a lot of comedies.
Holiday Rap by MC Micro G and DJ Swen.
So this wasn't a film that I grew up with.
It's boring as
I think I know that. Could you sing us a few bars?
What the living hell am I watching? Okay, so like I mentioned, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from 1975. Threw this one at you this week. Do you want me to start things off? Do you want to start things off? How would you like to do this, Yancy? Balls in your
So normally I told you this before. I like to take notes. I like to handwrite notes as I'm watching movies and stuff. Just because there's a lot of things that I'll miss, and sometimes I'll even watch the movie twice. Yep. So this is like a weird occurrence for me where I was so kind of gripped by the movie where I only wrote a couple lines and I had started off my normal process, and then eventually 2.5 hours later almost I was just watching the movie, and I think that's a credit to this, that it is so interesting. They're not necessarily the main focal point of the scene, but all these characters, the casting is so strong, and it's such an interesting movie. Not to give it away right off the top, but I really, really enjoyed this movie, and I'm kind of wondering why you sat on this for so long and why this wasn't the first ones you nominated, to be honest with you.
Well, spoiler alert, as always, every movie that we get into, we give away all the endings. So if you haven't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, go and watch it, and then come back and listen to this. this show. So why did I sit on this one for so long? That's a really good question because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Now, the problem is I say that about everything, but
That's fair.
It's, which I really do. I tend to exaggerate. But this movie is phenomenal. But the thing is, too, is like, you got to remember where I'm coming from. Like, I love comedies. I've always loved comedy. And so when I think of Gen X movies, a lot of times I tend to go back to those kind of classic comedies, like Stripes and Airplane and all those kind of things. So I tend to throw a lot of those at you just because I just love them so much. And I want to get your take on them. And I love talking about how you always say society's changed so much. You give me that every week. By the way, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned that again the other week. We're doing Animal House. Right? And you're like, well, society's changed so much now. This movie doesn't make any sense because, society only moves one way and that's forward and we progress and we're not like that anymore. You know what? I'm just going to call you out on that for a second. Okay. Just as a generational thing, because I'll tell you what, society hasn't changed all that much. And I'll tell you why. Okay. In 1978, if Jimmy Carter had said, grab him by the he wouldn't have been elected president. So don't tell me that society has moved all that much forward, young man, because it really, really hasn't.
That's a really strong point. That is a strong point. But, it's funny. As soon as I said that, too, I had to reflect on that. And it's actually really funny that you would bring this up because I literally, as soon as I said that line, I was like, well, that's kind of stupid because societies definitely take steps backward. You know what I mean? Who was it? Constantinople, literally burned every piece of literature in the entire world. It set back human civilization for 2,000 years. So societies do take steps back. They make decisions that are regressive. That stuff does happen. I guess I kind of meant in the grand scheme of things, time only moves forward is probably a better way of saying it. I'm not gonna backtrack on it. It was a stupid thing to say, but I do definitely see your point. There are certain things that are going on nowadays that actually are weirdly acceptable again. It's come full circle. Whereas, like you said, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, certain things actually were not okay. So it is interesting that you brought it up, and I actually completely agree with you. It was a stupid thing to say, and I wish I could take it back.
Oh, I'm not calling you out. Don't worry. It's not your generation that caused all the problems for you. It's probably my generation and baby boomers. So don't worry about it. They're the ones that probably voted that way. Anyway, that's not here. It's not a political show. So why did I keep this one so long? I don't know. Again, probably because I like to throw a lot of comedies at you, but this movie, it holds a special place in my heart because when I was young, I watched it for the first time. I was quite young when I watched it and I was just spellbound. I was always interested in acting as a young person. And this was one of the movies that made me kind of do that. I was like, wow, the power of acting is so incredible. And I also read the novel at a very young age. I was probably 10 or 11 when I read this novel, and the novel and the movie, they're quite different too. And we'll get into that tonight, I'm sure. But I don't know why I held it back so long, but I did. And I always had it in my back pocket that I wanted you to watch this. And so obviously you liked it. You thought it was a really, really good movie.
I did. I thought it was a fantastic movie. I have two really simple questions for you about this movie.
Sure.
I wanted to know as soon as I was watching this.
Yeah.
One, how old were you when you first saw it?
Okay. I would say I was probably about 10 years old. Now, keep in mind, I want you to keep in mind something. I watched it for the first time on television. So when it was on television, it was edited for TV. So any of the profanity was taken out, anything like that. So there was none of that stuff going on. So it was appropriate for me to watch, sort of, you know what I mean? But I was always very mature for my age too. When I was 10, I was probably a 10 going on 30. I really was. I was into politics when I was 8. I remember doing talking about politics. Now I'm Canadian too, but I was talking about Ed Broadbent and the NDP party and stuff when I was 8. My parents are like, you're crazy. You should be playing sports. What are you doing? So right. I think I was very mature to watch it. So I was 10 years old, but it was edited, like I say, on television. Okay.
That's interesting. Honestly, I thought this would strike me as one of those films where it came out and, you were around for it, but maybe you had kind of picked it up later in life. I've done with a lot of films, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like a kid's movie, but like you said, if your parents were willing to let you see stuff like that and you were mature enough to be receptive to it and not let it destroy you, I guess. And then my second question, Chris, was how many times have you watched this movie? Because as soon as I watched this movie, I literally said to myself, I'm like, I could watch this movie again, right now. I could literally put this movie right back on and watch this again. It was so interesting. So how many times have you taken it?
I would say more than 20.
Wow. Okay.
More than 20. Good. I watched it a lot. I remember even when I was in university, I had it on, no, this is back in the day when I had it on VHS, and I would subject my roommates to watching it over and over again, just because I just loved it so much. There's a lot of the messages in it that I really, really like and stuff like that. One thing that and we'll get into all that tonight. One of the things I did want to point out that I think is interesting, maybe you need to know this. So in the novel, okay, Ken Kesey wrote the novel, and it's this big counterculture kind of novel, anti-authority, novel from the 60s. And the one thing that makes it totally different from the movie is that right from the get-go, at the beginning of the novel, the novel is told from the point of view of Chief Bromden.
The silent guy,
yes.
like the guy that doesn't talk at all?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the movie, obviously, you don't find out until, 3/4 of the way through the movie that this guy can actually hear and speak and everything like that. So I'm going to throw a question to you on that. Whereas in the novel, you knew right from the beginning because he's the one that's telling the story in his head. And he's relaying this story about this McMurphy and how he comes and does all these things. But anyway, so for you, having never read the novel and just seeing the movie, was it a big reveal for you when that part came, when you realized, hey, this guy can talk and he can hear you?
It was. There were so many different characters that were kind of like that were sort of like a wallflower. They were there, but they weren't really integral to what was going on. They were just kind of characters thrown into the scene, or so I thought. So I found myself like constantly getting distracted and trying to, like, I knew something was going to happen with one of these characters. And, of course, your first assumption is going to be that Jack Nicholson's, like, something crazy is going to happen with him, obviously, because he's the main character. But I would keep gravitating towards, like, Danny DeVito's character or Christopher Lloyd's character, or, going back and forth trying to focus on these people. And then I realized at the very end of the movie, like, oh, yeah, I forgot about, the chief, like this one character out of all of those. And it completely caught me by surprise. And in all honesty, like, there were several moments where I thought I knew what was going on with this movie. I thought I knew exactly what was going on. Like, one of the very first scenes, whenever they bring in, I'm sorry, Jack Nicholson's character.
Randall P. McMurphy.
So McMurphy, sorry.
Yeah, McMurphy.
Whenever they bring him in for the first time and he's shackled up and everything, and obviously he looks crazy as hell. And, I'm literally thinking, I'm like, this guy is going to lose it as soon as they get these cuffs off. He's remaining calm because he's given them just enough sense of security. And as soon as he gets out of this thing, it's going to go crazy. And it doesn't. He's calm, and then all of a sudden he grabs him and he's like kisses the dude in the face. And, there's just so many like these like really like weird jarring moments where I expect it to go a certain way and it doesn't. They just keep pulling the rug out from underneath me. Like, I didn't expect, like we said, the chief, I did not expect him to be able to speak, and he's like, oh, juicy fruit, like in perfect English. You know what I mean? There's just so many twists and turns like that. And like, even at the very end, I'm thinking, okay, so surely, he's going to break out and he's going to be like deuces, and it's going to leave like this huge void with all these people, and they're going to have to reconcile like life without, Jack Nicholson's character, who you just said, and I still forgot his name, but and it doesn't end up like that. He basically he passes out drunk, or is it a conscious decision that he stays there with them? And then I think
it's a conscious decision, because if you think about the way that this movie is edited, it's done very, very quick edits, very, very short shots and quick edits all put together, except for that last scene. And you think about it, he has this party, right? And they get the window open. They get the keys off the guy because the guy's drunk. So they go and get his keys, right? And so they open up the window and they can get out. But McMurphy, one of the things that's really important about his character is he shares everything. He shares everything. He shares, his cards, his booze, his cigarettes, his girlfriend. He shares everything, right, with these people. And so he lets Billy Bibbit be with his girlfriend, right? Because Billy Bibbit, is a virgin and, whatever. And so he lets this happen, right? And while this is happening, he's sitting there at the open window. And you realize he's kind of pondering things, and he realizes he's done. He's not going to be able to get away. There's no way. And so but like, my reason why I mentioned the editing is it's got all these short edits, short, quick edits. And then in that scene, it's one long shot. It goes on for, I don't know, like a couple of minutes, where it's just a shot on him just pondering everything. And he realizes he's not going to get away. Right. So he doesn't. So he just keeps drinking and passes out.
Is it that he's, maybe this is, just me nitpicking where I shouldn't, but is it that he thinks that he's not going to get away, or that he's almost like accepted this as like, almost like he wants to be there?
That's what I mean. Yeah, I think he accepts the fact that he's doing this and he's not going to get away, and he's okay with that. He comes to terms with that, right? It's okay. This is the way
really
it's
interesting. Like I love, like I've told you this, I love open-ended, like a non-resolution or something that's just completely ambiguous and left up to interpretation. And you can see this going a lot of different ways. And honestly, like, I thought the ending was just so like beautiful, because I did not expect that at all.
Let's come back to the ending in a second. You mentioned characters, so let's touch base on a couple of them. So starting with McMurphy, obviously, he is like this breath of fresh air that comes into the ward, right? And like he comes in, he's like, he gives everyone nicknames. He's calling me Tabes and Billy the Club, and Chezer and Hard On and all this. And like I said, he shares everything with it. But the thing is, he's an anti-hero, if ever there was. He's not likable. I mean, hell, he's in jail for statutory rape of like a 16-year-old girl. He's an incarcerated criminal, Yep. It's so he's not like a likable hero, but for him, it's all about like he has this love of life. Like he lives life to the fullest at all times. And
regardless of the ramifications.
Exactly. And one of the things that I love is how he comes into this situation and he goes around and instills life into each of the other men. And, because they're all going through life not by living, they're just by existing, right? And he changes all that and instills life. And I think that's a big, powerful thing for me. Like, and the thing that is, like he thinks if he gets sent to this institution, he's going to be out in the same time that he had left on his prison sentence. But not so fast. She dictates when he's going to get out. And that's when he turns on the other guys. And he wants to know, like, well, why didn't you guys warn me? You let me go on, picking on her, and then that's when he finds out that they're voluntary.
All of them.
They're all volunteer except for a couple, like the Chronics and stuff. And he just cannot fathom how that they could be out. Like, he's like, Billy, you should be out, like, you should be out, with girls, and driving around and having fun and not in here. Like, I don't understand. So his character for me is all about life and instilling life and living life to the fullest. And that's what it is. What about?
I want to touch on something really quick because you brought up a really interesting point. So you mentioned him bringing that zeal, right? Everything full out, regardless. He's the anti-hero. And I literally found myself saying, like, multiple times, I'm like, I want to hate this guy because, I mean, technically he's a child rapist, but he's also super, super charismatic. And the part that you mentioned where you said that he brings life into all of the, I guess, patients, you could call them, not inmates, but patients. Right. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it also has the same effect with the nurse, Ratchet. I think it does the same thing with her because if you remember, there's this conference after he takes them all out on this like fishing excursion, which was the most random like aside that I've seen in a film. It was so random, but after that, they're having this discussion with all the dean of the ward and all these different psychologists and doctors, and it's actually her who says, what, I think he's dangerous, but I think that instead of us passing on the problem to somebody else, why don't we take care of it? I almost feel like that is like her acknowledging that she's also intrigued by him, like he's also kind of stirred up some sort of fire in her, where maybe it's not necessarily like she admires him or she wants him around, but she's almost like welcoming this new challenge that she does understand that he's different. So like, just like he brings life into all of these different people with, perceived mental illnesses, he does the same thing with her and like kind of like rejuvenates her in a sense. I mean, she could have just as easily sent this guy away and she chose not to. What do you think about that?
No, she wasn't going to do that for one reason only, because she represents authority and he represents chaos, and she's not going to have that. She's not going to put that on someone else. She's going to take that on herself because she wants to put down her foot and she wants to exert authority over him in any way possible. And obviously we see that, she does, right? I mean, look at her. She's got like perfect hair. Her like it's all tight back in a bun. It's shaped like the devil's horns too. I don't think that's by accident. Her hat's perfect. Her clothes are perfect. Everything. She's the epitome of authority. Absolute epitome of authority. And she was fantastic, by the way, Louise Fletcher in that role. So fantastic in that role. Man, she was good.
She was.
Oh, yes, but like I say, so she needs him as much as he needs her because they're the yin and yang to each other, right? So I think that's important. And for the drama of the story, obviously, they have to be at opposite ends of the spectrum. But like, what did you think of her character and kind of the actress that played her and all of that?
I thought that, like you said, she's super, super hard. I didn't even take notice of, like you said, her hairstyle, like the tight kind of like bun thing. Like it does look like devil's horns, almost like Maleficent or something from Sleeping Beauty. And like just how she is so put together. She's so stoic. She's always like, every time she says something, she seems so calculated. And like even the first scene where like she walks in and, she's walking into a place and it's almost like she has everybody trained. They're like, oh, Good morning, Miss Ratchet. Good morning. Like everybody knows like you have a role. You know what I mean? Like there is a proper way to do things and it's my way. And like I just love that like she's always steadfast. She's always kind of playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. And like like my favorite instance is where McMurphy wants to watch the World Series, which I can relate to. I love the World Series. But he wants to watch the World Series. And she says, okay, if you want to, we will do majority rules. And so, of course, he's assuming, we have all these guys around us in this little circle right here. He thinks that means a majority is, oh, yeah, just this little collection of people right here. And then, of course, she knows that there's exactly 18 people in this ward, and exactly half of them are essentially mutes. They cannot communicate. They can't do anything like that, right? So she knows this, and she's just playing games with him. You know what I mean? Like he thinks that he's going to win these guys over and get the vote and get what he wants. But, like I said, she's so calculated, and she's all she thinks about is how she's going to break this guy. And I just think it's like such a well thought out, developed character. And I mean, honestly, like there was a part of me that was, this makes me sound like a monster, but when he does jump on her at the end and starts choking her out, like a part of me felt like relief. I'm like, oh my God. In the universe where this character, this woman exists in real life, like I want her gone. You know what I mean? Maybe that's just me rebelling against authority, but like I felt such like a wave of gratification whenever that happened. What do you think about that?
I think that's what they were trying to pull at, with the audience, and obviously it worked. A couple other characters I want to touch base on, like Tabor, which was Christopher Lloyd. It was his first film role, by the way. When I was at Fan Expo in 2016, like obviously I had a chance to go to his Q&A, and he mentioned this was his first movie. He went to New York, and he was, sort of got discovered and got a chance to go out and do this movie. So it was great. This, I think the scene when the cigarette, remember when it goes into his pant cuff?
Oh, yes.
And it burns him and he freaks out. And then, of course, they're all thinking he's having this mental fit and they carry him away. I think he's an important character because don't forget, too, it's his laugh that basically ends the film. Remember when he laughs when he thinks McMurphy's escaped from the ward by throwing the fountain out when it was really the chief that did it, But the fact that it wasn't even McMurphy that did that, it didn't really matter. Because to those guys, they think McMurphy's escaped. And
by McMurphy escaping, like a part of them won. Basically.
Exactly.
The good guy won.
And the fact that he only escaped by dying was, makes it bittersweet or whatever. But the other character two other characters that I think are interesting in this movie are Billy Bibbit, obviously, Brad Dourif, who went on to do, again, a lot of these people got typecast. Like not all of them, Christopher Lloyd and, Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito, maybe not so much, but Louise Fletcher definitely did. Brad Dourif did, although Brad Dourif went on to do the voice of Chucky, in those Child's Play movies.
Yes.
Yeah, so he
That's
did that.
Chucky? Are you serious?
Yeah. So, but
so random.
Like in that scene when Nurse Ratched finds Billy Bibbit with the woman and threatens to tell his mother. Right. And he freaks out and then he ends up slashing his wrists rather than face his mother. Like she knew that would get him. Right. And she did it. And that was the final straw for McMurphy when he tried to kill him, as you mentioned. And Candy, I thought, was an interesting character, too. It's because, and here's why, because she's Nicholson's girlfriend, right? And she kind of comes off as kind of ditzy and goofy, but I actually liked her. And here's why, because she's willing to go along with whatever McMurphy's cooking up, right? Mm-hmm. I loved the scene when you mentioned it, when they go out on the fishing trip. I love when they go and pick her up and she gets on the bus. And remember, she's at the front and she turns and she looks at them all and she goes, "Are you guys all crazy?" And they all nod. Yes.
Yep.
but she, what? She doesn't judge them for it or anything.
Yeah. It's not mean. It's just like, it's like amusing to her. She's like, "Oh wow, you guys are all crazy."
I don't know. And like you said, that fishing trip, I thought it was so fun. Like you said, it's just random. But for me, I think it was an important part of the movie because to me, that scene has always meant like it shows that they're just human beings. They're just a bunch of guys. Like remember when McMurphy introduces them all to the harbor master and he introduces them all as doctors?
And they're all dead serious, like playing the role. Oh my God.
He's like, "Doctor,
that was one of my favorite
doctor."
scenes.
And then my favorite was when he says Dr. Scanlon, the esteemed Dr. Scanlon.
and he just nods in approval.
Yeah, like, and for 1 second, this crazy ass guy with the long beard actually looks
can
like,
keep it together.
He looks like he could be an esteemed doctor. He's got this long beard and everything. Now the harbor master probably doesn't buy it, for a second, but the men do. And that's what really matters. So, I don't know. So many things. I don't even know whatever. Like I mentioned, the editing I think was important, the way that's done and the way they play up the last scene. There's a saying, and you've heard it before. It's in a song called "I Fought the Law and the Law Won." Mm-hmm. And that's the case here, unfortunately, because the law, like the administration of this place, they do everything they can to try and stop McMurphy and keep him in check. They use shock therapy. And when they finally can no longer control him, they give him a lobotomy. But they will do everything they can to keep him in check. I think, we've talked before about movies versus films. I definitely put this in the film category. Would you agree with that? Oh,
for sure. Chris, for sure. Yeah.
And the reason for that is not just because it's good and good acting and all that, but because to me, it's a really great example of cinema verite, which, if you're not really familiar with film styles and things like that, it's basically like truthful cinema. Right? It's from the French. And Milos Forman was a big influence in that movement. And I think it's important because, again, having read the book, the book was different. It was like there was a lot of hallucinations in the book, which may or may not have been influenced, by the author's drug use himself. I don't know. But there was like scenes where arms are coming out of walls and like people are changing shapes. It's really weird, right? But the film instead, they portray it all as real with cinema verite, right? Like they use a lot of non-actors. Will Sampson, the chief, non-actor. The doctor was a non-actor. And the thing was, they shot it in a real institution in Oregon, right? They used a lot of staff and patients, in the movie, and lots of natural light and real settings. There's no sound stages or like lit sets or anything like that. So it's a film, of sort of the nth degree for me. I don't know if you noticed in the credits, but Michael Douglas was a producer of the film. Did you happen to spot that or no?
I did, but to be honest with you, I glossed over because I did not think that it was the same Michael Douglas.
It was. So basically what happened was Ken Kesey wrote the novel, as I mentioned, right? And then what they did was they adapted it into a play. And Kirk Douglas played McMurphy. And then he bought the rights to the material, right? And he tried forever to get it made into a movie. And then when it kind of started to gain some steam, like, hey, they might be able to make this into a movie. It was in the early 70s, and he was too old to play the lead. So he gave the rights to his son, Michael, and said, hey, you know what? Produce this movie. And, that kind of helped get things made. Another thing I should touch base on, we always talk about movies sort of being reflective of their times. And sometimes, how popular a movie is has as much to do with just good timing, just coming out at the right time. And I think that was the case here because if you think about it, it comes out in 75, right? The 60s are over. Nixon ran on a Law and Order platform. Right. And then you've got Kent State happened in 71 and then Watergate happened, which obviously culminated in Nixon resigning. And so by the time this movie came out in 75, there was a massive distrust of authority going on in the country. Right. And that's the prevailing theme here. Right. It's all about rebelling against the powers that be. And the movie was obviously incredibly successful. It swept the Oscars, one of only 3 movies in history to win all 5 of the major Oscars.
God, you are destroying my trivia questions.
Sorry. But I mean, like, it's just, I really, really love this movie a lot, and it's funny. We mentioned Nurse Ratched, another thing is like, they originally didn't want Louise Fletcher to play the part. Like there was names like Jane Fonda and Faye Dunaway attached to it and all this. And it ended up obviously going to Louise Fletcher, and she was she was so good, but it killed her career. She was so good. She was typecast after that, But I don't know. There's just something about it when he comes in the beginning and he just starts defying authority. Like, if you remember the first scene, he's like riffling his cards at the first session and she's like,
he does it twice, and then she looks at him
and she's
like,
annoyed,
okay.
Right? And I like what you said about the World Series. He wants to watch the World Series. She's like, no, and she pulls that. As he called it, that hen house crap on them, about she didn't count the one vote or the session was over, right? Yep. So what does he do? He goes and sits in front of the TV. The TV's not on, pretends the game's on, and starts screaming and yelling at the TV like, yeah, round and second, round and third, yeah, he's going to score. And
which is even more disruptive.
I know, and all the men join in. They're like cheering, yeah, it's the greatest thing ever. Like, it's all about like sort of sticking it to the man. You know what I mean? And just thumbing things up thumbing your nose at authority. And I don't know.
I think we've talked, one of my favorite words that I repeat all the time is duality. Yeah. So we talk about how like, obviously it's about authority and, rebelling against authority. And I think it's also about too, like this duality between everybody in this movie is kind of, they have 2 sides to them. At the very beginning of the film, it kind of shows like these people taking care of these patients. And, a lot of them are actually super attentive and they're very nice and they're physically affectionate and, like actually taking care of these people. And it looks like a real, like a warm place, like at the very, very beginning of the movie, right? And then of course, as it divulges, as stuff starts to break down, obviously you see them, punching them in the face and poking them with sticks in the pool, and they start to get aggressive with them. I'm talking about the actual workers and stuff, yep. Right? So they're actually physically aggressive with these people. So you see, it's like, no, they're not really taking care of them. Like they're quote unquote good people who are taking care of the mentally disabled, but they also have this dark side to them too. Nurse Ratched obviously is like that. She, in her mind, she probably thinks she's overall doing a net good, but she's very, very, she's got issues. Obviously she has issues, you know what I mean? And then even with McMurphy's character, where, like I said, you want to believe that he's this super charismatic guy. He gives fire to like all these people who are basically living for nothing. They have no excitement or no zeal or zest in their life whatsoever. But like I said, also a child rapist who, justifies his actions because, what man wouldn't see that, 15-year-old redheaded as he puts it in his face. Like, what man wouldn't do that? You know what I mean? And, not to be derogatory, but everybody has like two sides to them. And like you flip back and forth. Like, I honestly, at certain points, I loved Nurse Ratched. Like, I thought like, man, I love strong female leads. I love it. Like, I think I've talked about this to you before. All of my favorite actresses are like women who like Kate Beckinsale and like Underworld or something, like women who kick ass basically. And I love that she kicks ass, but I also love that like there's a little bit of crazy in her. And it also like it brings to question. I think one of the main like lines to the movie is like, if I'm crazy, then what does that make you? I think I read that somewhere talking about this. It's like one of the like, slogans that they use for promoting the movie. Like, I love the fact that like every single person in this movie could probably be a little crazy depending on who's judging them. You know what I mean? Like, the nurse could definitely be crazy. A lot of these keepers could be crazy. And of course, anybody that's in the mental ward themselves could be crazy. So there's just a lot that I just said there, but I just like that everything has like multiple sides to it. Like you said, like a yin and a yang, and McMurphy and Ratched like deserve each other. They need each other. They, it's like with the Dark Knight that we talked about, with Batman and the Joker saying that, I don't want to kill you. You complete me. With Nurse Ratched, she's like, I'm not going to send him away. I want him here and I want to control him.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point. Like, cause there's one scene in the movie when he goes, come on guys. Like, what do you think you are, crazy or something? You're not. You're no crazier than the average person walking around out on the street. Right.
Yep.
And
no subjective.
Yeah. One of the biggest themes for this movie for me always has been freedom. If you think about when McMurphy first comes in, that opening scene, like you mentioned, when he comes into the institution and they take those handcuffs off of him, he jumps up and down, he kisses them, right? Because he's free. It's like he's free. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the movie, as sad as it is, but when the chief kills him, he sets him free. He sets him free from a life as a vegetable. He wouldn't want to live like that, right? Mm-hmm. So the chief frees him, right? It's like a triumph of the spirit over authority and repression. I don't know. Like I say, freedom's a big thing. And like even though the fact it takes place in an institution, where authority sort of rules all and everything's kind of bland and bleak in there, there's very little freedom at all inside those walls. But the film celebrates life, and that's pretty incredible when you think about it. It
is.
Like for me, at the end of the movie, when the nurse is in the neck brace after he's choked her out, right? And then, he gets lobotomy and everything, and she's in that neck brace. And then, I think it's very symbolic because you got to realize it's not just her neck, but her control is broken as well, right? Mm-hmm. The men believe McMurphy's some kind of hero, right? Who's escaped, he beat her, he got away, and, even though he didn't really escape sort of physically, right? But the chief makes sure that he escapes sort of in spirit, right? Like I said, by setting him free. And, even that scene when the chief is snuffing the life out of him with that pillow. Like, if you notice, McMurphy's body puts up quite a fight. Like, he does not want to let go of life, Yep. And then the chief escapes and he runs away to Canada. Remember, he said he was going to go to Canada. And
so one last thing about the chief thing, though. So let me ask you this, because like you said, you've watched it multiple times,
sure.
And maybe I missed this, but he has a conversation with the chief, and he talks about his father, about how like his father would drink and drink and drink
yep.
until he was basically like withering away.
Yes.
And so I think it indirectly kind of implies. Well, even Jack Nicholson's character says like, did you kill your father, or did you take your father's life or something? And then he kind of says like in a roundabout, like, I wouldn't say I killed him. Like basically like he made the decision himself, almost like I was the one who killed him, but like he made the decision. Was that kind of like the same thing? Or
no, I think what the chief was saying in that moment when they were sitting there and they were talking at the end, right? Like he said, he was really big, right? He was a big guy. He did whatever he wanted. And when he drank a lot, right? And he says that, it was he didn't suck from the bottle sucked from him. And he goes, I'm not saying they killed him. The important thing that the chief says is that they worked on him just the way they're working on you.
Oh, okay. See, honestly, I was assuming that he meant like he saw his father like at like his worst state, and like he basically like took his life. He killed his father, and that's why he admitted himself into the institution. And then I kind of thought that like, the whole reason why the chief would not leave the institution was because like he was basically like afraid of himself. He was afraid that he would do something like that again. And whenever he actually does kill McMurphy at the end and then runs free, I was like really, really confused. But maybe I've just made something out of a plot line that actually isn't there.
Yeah, I didn't take it that way. But like you just said, when he escapes and he runs away, the cool thing is too, don't forget, like he runs away, he leaves the window open behind him. So theoretically, any of those other men, they could have escaped behind him.
And they don't.
But they don't, because they think it's McMurphy escaping. So in a way, they're free too, because McMurphy freed all of them to express themselves, right? He instilled them all with life. damn, man, this is a good movie. Oh man, I can't believe talking about it. Like
it really is a good movie. It really is.
You know, and the fact that, you know, all these themes and like conformity is kind of the opposite of freedom, you know, and I think it really stresses the importance of the individual, which I think is really, really important. It's a very 60s kind of film. You know what I mean? And oh man, it's just so good. So anyway, so obviously you liked it a lot. Would you give it a rating out of 10 for me, please?
I mean, honestly, Chris, this is one of the more perfect movies I think I've ever seen. I don't know if I gushed about it enough just because we were kind of talking about like the minutia of the film, but I mean, from start to finish, like I said, this was what, 2 hours and 13 minutes or 2 hours and 17 minutes, something like that. Even as the credits started rolling, like I didn't want to like turn it off. It was really, really weird how fast it went by, how completely into it and enthralled I was with the film. It's so smart, and I want to keep going back because like. To be honest with you, I'd never seen Jack Nicholson this young before. I've only seen him in like, you know, he hasn't made a movie. I looked at his credits since like 2010 or something like that. It's been several years since he's been in a movie. And like I've always just seen him as like the old guy, the old, you know, kind of like crotchety, like he's set in his ways, like this surly guy. And like to see him young like that and see him like super, super charismatic and just like how he literally just like demands the attention of the camera. It was really, really interesting. We've seen Danny DeVito. For a while, I didn't realize it was Danny DeVito. I had no idea. So like, wow. I'm looking forward to even. Yeah, I know. I'm telling you, like the films I've seen him in, he was just older. He was heavier. He didn't have as much hair. So like, it was just wild seeing that. But I mean, this is as close to a perfect film as I can recall. So like, I'd give it like a 9.8, 9.7.
Wow.
It's
I would go it's
pretty
high.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I would probably say 9.7 as well. Like it's just so good because, like I say, thematically, you know, from a film point of view, like I say, with cinema verite, with the acting in it, with everything else that's going on in it, with the storyline, with the way it ends, like it's pretty much perfect. I mean, I really, really like this movie a lot. It just says a lot too. One other quick thing, I'm curious: did you find that there were any religious overtones in the film? Or not? When I read the book, when I read the book seemed to have a lot of religious overtones to it, and I'm just wondering if any of those came through in the movie. I mean, if you want to just be directly, I mean, there are obviously things like fishing and the pool was kind of baptism, but I think both the author Ken Kesey and the director Milos Forman, which by the way, Ken Kesey, I should mention, the author of the book, has never seen the movie. He was against this movie from the beginning because the thing was, he wrote a screenplay for it, but he wanted it to be told from the point of view from the chief. Mm-hmm. And Milos Forman was like, no, I don't want to do that. It's got to come from it's McMurphy's story. That's who this story is about. And so Ken Kesey walked away from the project, has never watched the movie. Ever. But I can say both him and the director were both, you know, very familiar with religion, you know, like, and I think it definitely works its way in. Like McMurphy comes across as very Christ-like in the book. You know, in the movie, I think there's still elements of it there, like the fact that, you know, he kind of dies so the men can experience freedom and all that. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but the book was had a lot of religious overtones to it.
You know, honestly, like I've kind of been trained, like over the years, just to kind of recognize religious allegory, and maybe it is because it's so, I don't know, it's so much more buried than normal. But like, I wasn't picking up on it at all. I was more. Whenever you show me older movies, Chris, I always immediately get these moments where I feel really dumb because it'll harken back to a newer piece of pop culture that I assumed was an original thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I assumed that something that I watched in the last 10 or 15 years was just its own thing. And no, that's a remake, or, you know, somebody else derived that from that. Like I was watching this and I literally thought with like the first opening scene where, you know, they're all like walking in line. It's playing like this like cheerful, like upbeat, you know, like kind of like a orchestral music. It's like a really light, kind of like fun soundtrack going on, and they're all lining up and taking their pills and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I see them, you know, they're all in line, they're all moving like almost in unison. I immediately think like, wow, that looks like the Wall music video from Pink Floyd, you know, which came out 8-9 years later. I don't know if it's the exact same thing, but
who knows?
Or like the
might have been influenced. Yep.
Where like this movie where you know, it's it's a bunch of crazy people basically, and they break out and they go and they have like an adventure. Like that's basically like Girl Interrupted with Angelina Jolie. My wife pointed that out to me. Or like The Ringer. It was a low budget film with Johnny Knoxville a couple years ago, where it's basically the same premise, but it's actually a really funny, endearing movie where like the people who are mentally and physically handicapped are not actually the joke at all. Like it was like a really cool movie, but it took this same concept, you know, like a very, very serious rated R drama from 1975 and kind of like reinvented it. But like everything is derivative at this point, and I guess like that's more what I notice whenever I watch films that you show me, Chris, is like everything is a remix of something else, and that just like really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I mean, you could go back and there's other films that this probably drew from. You mentioned Nicholson too. I think it's important to touch base because one of the things I hopefully will do when I make you watch some of these Gen X movies is have you go back and go, wow, some of these guys were really good. Like if you only know Nicholson from his later work, where you said like he plays the crotchety guy, or maybe you're familiar with, have you seen A Few Good Men?
I have not. No.
Oh, jeez. Okay. So, I mean,
I know.
And that's even like really from kind of your, generation more than mine. But,
all right, relax.
You see a movie like that, where he's yelling, you can't handle the truth and all this. And you realize, man, that guy's a good actor. Yeah, he is a good actor. But if you go back and watch this, you realize he's not just a good actor. He's legendary. He's legendary. And I couldn't imagine, and I know a lot of movies, you see this, but I couldn't imagine anyone else playing the part than him. I just couldn't imagine it. Like he was just so iconic, in that role. He was just so good. He brought everything to that role. He put it all on the table in his performance. He laid everything out there. And I just thought he was just phenomenal. The energy, the zeal for life, and just this desire to live life to its fullest. It's like, it's almost unparalleled in cinema. Like it was so good.
Did you think that he was actually kind of crazy, or was that just like something that was like we were being toyed with? Like I thought the big reveal was going to be like,
I think
he's pretending, but he actually is crazy. That's not what happened.
No. He's crafty. What happened was he's in prison and he realizes prison sucks. Prison is really, really, really hard. I don't like this. Hey, wait a minute.
He has a work program and he's lazy. Yeah.
I have an idea. Maybe if I act like I'm crazy, they'll send me over here and this place is easy. And he even mentions that at one point he's in the pool. He's like, this is nothing. He goes, big deal. They just, they just send me back to the feed farm if I escape or whatever. Who cares? This is easy. And I'm going to be out here in 30 days or whatever, or 100 days or whatever the scene is. He's like, I got 100 days. The guy's like, what the hell are you talking about?
He actually said 69 days. I remember 69? That because I said to myself, nice.
Yeah, because he's like, 69 days. I'm going to be out of here. It's like, guy's like, what are you talking about? He goes, that's when my sentence is up. I'm out of here. He's like,
where do you think you are?
Yeah, this isn't prison. It doesn't carry over. You're in the same amount of days you get to go. You leave when we say you leave. And then that's when he realizes, oh man, I've been needling her the whole time and all this, and no one told me. And they were all like, well, we just thought you were voluntary. Like, I don't know. I think that he did that on purpose. He kind of faked it to get it sent over to the institution, thinking that it was going to be a hell of a lot easier. He's not going to be in shackles all day. He's not going to be getting beat up in the yard, getting rolled for cigarettes and stuff like that. It's going to be easier, and he's going to be crafty, and he's smarter than them all. Randall P. McMurphy, he's smarter than everybody. He's going to go over there, and he realized it didn't work out that way because he never left. Right? So that was my take on it. So anyway, okay, so time to get to some trivia.
Fun with Yancy.
All right, so it's over to you. If you want, you can pepper me with some trivia, and I'll do my best to answer it.
Yeah, sure. So as always, like I really spent a lot of time on these trivia questions, and you killed maybe half of them, which is really, really frustrating. Because like I use IMDb a lot, obviously, just because it's such a fantastic resource. But like I was like going deep. I was finding articles and like really, really obscure stuff. And of course, it doesn't matter with you. So let me start with this. So you mentioned that the insane asylum, or whatever you want to call it, the mental institute, whatever it was called. It was in Oregon, which was correct. Can you name the two different cities in Oregon where several of the scenes were shot in this film?
Oh, I don't know. It was in a small town. It wouldn't have been Portland, but it would have been in a smaller town, I'm sure. But I don't know what it was.
Yeah, so it was Depew Bay in Salem, Oregon.
Oh, in Salem.
By chance,
okay, yes.
Yeah, can you name the state and, as a bonus, the city that the boating scene was filmed in? It was not Oregon.
Oh, see, I thought it was shot in Oregon. For some reason, I thought they were out there and they shot it there. I know they shot that last, but I would have said Oregon for sure. I thought that they shot it in that little bay in Oregon. But
no, it was actually in Fort Bragg, California.
Oh, wow.
Which, was kind of interesting to me, too. So
very cool.
Okay, so we talked a lot about Louise Fletcher. She was fantastic, and she won an Academy Award for this, for her, as a Best Actress.
Oh, yeah.
She also played Miss Nellie in what 1950s TV series about an ex-Confederate soldier who turns into a degenerate gambler?
I don't remember. I don't know. The 50s is before my time, and I just don't know it.
It's actually by chance, I happened to see this whenever I was going through her IMDb page, and it's Yancy Derringer. My actual name.
Oh, man,
Yancy
Derringer. Very cool. See, Yancy I remember, I thought she was in, like, I don't know, I thought she was in a couple other TV series, but I didn't know that one.
Yep. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So Jack Nicholson, he also won an Academy Award for this film as a Best Actor.
Yes.
So can you tell me how many times total he's been nominated for an Academy Award?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm going to say probably at least 3 times. So I'll say 3 or 4. I'll say 3.
Nominated?
Yeah. No, winner. Like how many times he's won the award.
Yeah. So that is correct. He has won 3. Can you tell me how many times he has been nominated?
Oh, how many times been? Oh, probably more than 10. I would say, I don't know. So I'll say 11.
Very close. It was actually 12.
Oh, so close. Yeah, it was a lot.
Very
of
nice.
times.
Yeah. My next question would have been how many did he win? But of course
he
got
won
that
3 times. Yeah.
Okay, so he, along with what other actor, has received an Oscar nomination in every decade from 1960 through the 2000s? It was one other actor who did this feat. Can you name the actor?
Was it Michael Caine?
It was Michael Caine.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
By the way, Michael Caine,
Michael Caine is in everything. We always say that on the show.
It's
He's in
so
everything.
wild.
Yeah, he's in everything.
He's been in probably 3 or 4 movies that you and I have done for reviews.
Yep.
Just us.
Yeah. I know. He's great.
What are the questions do I have? Okay, so the cast in this film obviously is amazing. It's incredible, and like you said, a lot of actors got their starts in this. Some of them, never really did anything else, or they became typecast. But for this particular movie, like they really nailed the casting.
Oh yeah, they're great.
So Jane Feinberg, that was the name of the casting director of this, and she also has 149 other credits to her name as casting director. Can you name at least 3 other films that she has been a part of?
As a casting director? I don't know.
Yes.
I'll say that she worked with Nicholson again, so I will say I'll go with Terms of Endearment, and I'll say As Good as It Gets, and what's another one that he did? Let's go with Batman.
Batman, no. I think you got 2 of them correct.
Just totally random thinking that she would have worked with Nicholson again. So.
Yeah, I can name off a couple of the really, really big ones. This was what really caught my eye. I know casting director is somewhat of like an esoteric question, but she did all the casting for Aliens. She did Back to the Future, so there we get the Christopher Lloyd connection. She did Blade Runner. She did Forbidden Son. She did multiple of the Indiana Jones movies, Harry and the Hendersons. I mean, it literally goes on and on. Finders Keepers, Memorial Day, A Christmas Story. Like I said, 150 credits to her name. I thought it was really, really interesting. So obviously this woman knows what she's doing. And like you said, a lot of them, she kept reusing the same like core of actors, kind of like a Tim Burton just keeps using like Edward Norton over. It's really interesting.
And that's why I kind of latched on to Nicholson for that question, thinking that she would do that.
So you got this question right, or you touched on it, but let me see if you can get the other part of it. So you did mention that it's one of 3 films that won all 5 major Oscars, right?
Yep.
So Best Picture, Best Actor, Actress, Director, and Screenplay.
Yeah, that's tough to do.
What are the other 2 films that also hold this distinction?
So It Happened One Night was the first one from the 30s, and then the next one was all the way into 1992, I guess it was, with Silence of the Lambs.
Correct. You nailed that. And I honestly had never heard of It Happened One Night, which is, I know, really bad.
Oh, Capra.
I'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
Let me think if I have any other questions that you have not already destroyed. Actually, I think that's it, Chris. You did a pretty good job, and it's obviously pretty apparent that you know a lot about movies, but we knew this already going into it.
Yeah, and this movie too. Like, I mean, it's a very seminal film, obviously, with some of these actors, being first time on the screen, like DeVito and Christopher Lloyd and things like that. And but a lot of them, like other than those guys, a lot of the other actors, they just got typecast. Right? Like,
yep.
I mean, like Chief Bromden, okay. I mean, Will Sampson, how many roles is this guy going to get, because he just looks so imposing, right? He's kind of stuck. I think I remember him being in like Poltergeist 2 or something like that, if I remember correctly. But like Louise Fletcher was just so good. She just became so incredibly typecast. It was really hard for her to find work after that. And, I guess I can kind of understand because like you couldn't imagine anyone else playing that part other than her.
Yep.
No, it was a really good movie. No two ways about it. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it because, like I say, maybe next week or next time that I have to nominate a film, I'll go back to one of those comedies again. But every once in a while, I'll pull a surprise on you, this or The Killing Fields or something that was very dramatic but very, very influential. And I'm glad that I'm able to show you some of these movies, and you do it with me too. You make me watch these millennial films that I have not otherwise seen. That at least allows us to kind of educate each other about all the good stuff that goes on in our generations. But anyway, we'll wrap things up there. Next week, we're going to come back with a top 5 list. So we'll do that. So you don't have to nominate a film for that. But I'm glad you like this one. That's for sure.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. But until next week, I tell you what, we'll come back. What do you say we take a look at sequels next week? We've been wanting to do that for a while. Why don't we come back and talk about like our favorite sequels of all time?
I would love nothing more, Chris.
I think
Let's
that's
do
a
it.
good one. I think we need to do that. So think about your favorite top 5 favorite sequels of all time. We'll probably both agree on the top one, so we'll just get that one out of the way. But we'll do that at the top of next show. That's for sure. But until then, this is Chris McBrien for Yancy Eaton saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at @CMcBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.